As that new steady strength settled deeper into my chest, I felt the noise in the room fade even more, almost as if everyone sensed the shift in my posture and the weight behind my silence, because for the first time that day, I was not overwhelmed or confused or hurt. I was simply ready to speak, ready to face her, ready to stop pretending that everything she had done over the years was small enough to ignore and my sister-in-law must have noticed something in the way I straightened my shoulders, because she finally lifted her head and her eyes met mine with a mixture of challenge and curiosity, and maybe even a hint of fear buried beneath her stubborn pride, and that tiny flicker gave me the final push I needed, because it told me that deep down she knew she had gone too far. She knew this time she had crossed a line she would not be able to step back over without consequences. And as I stepped forward a few inches, the room grew quiet, my family watching with wide expectant eyes, each person carrying their own hope or fear about what might happen next. And I could see my mom silently pleading for peace, but also knowing that peace could no longer come from staying silent, and my dad looked torn between stepping in and letting me handle what had been building for years. And I let myself breathe in the thick charged air around us, feeling the history of every moment rise to the surface like a wave ready to break. And I looked at her, the woman who had caused so much tension and pain without ever taking responsibility, and all the memories came rushing forward. The days she mocked my cooking, the afternoons she criticized my home, the holidays she ruined with her cold comments, and the family gatherings she turned into battlefields with her constant need for attention and dominance. And I realized that she had not only disrespected me, but she had disrespected my entire family while expecting us to stay quiet because she thought our kindness made us weak. And in that realization, I found a deeper strength than anything I had ever felt before, a strength that came from knowing I was finally done enabling her behavior, finally done accepting her cruelty, finally done letting her shape the atmosphere of my home. And as I stood there looking into her eyes, I felt a sense of clarity so sharp it almost felt like a physical sensation spreading through me, and I knew that when I opened my mouth to speak, every word would carry the weight of everything I had held back for years. And there was no turning back now, no softening, no hiding, no shrinking away from the truth, because the truth had already risen. It was already burning in the air around us, and it was only waiting for me to finally let it out. The moment I opened my mouth to speak, I felt a strange release, as if all the tension of years had finally found a way to escape, and the words tumbled out not with anger, but with a clarity I had never experienced before. I told her how her actions had affected me, how the soup was never just about the food, it was about the way she treated everyone around her with disregard and cruelty, and I reminded her of all the little things she had done over the years, the comments, the criticisms, the way she made gatherings uncomfortable, the way she dismissed efforts that were made with love. And while I spoke, I could see the change in the room, the energy shifting slightly, people leaning and listening, breathing differently, hoping this time things would be different. And as I continued, I felt my heart beat not with fear, but with a steady rhythm of empowerment, because I was finally acknowledging the pain and refusing to let it be ignored any longer. And my sister-in-law blinked a few times, her face changing subtly from smugness to a mixture of surprise and confusion, as if she had never expected anyone to confront her like this. And I could see her shifting her weight nervously as the words sank in, the truth hitting harder than anything she had faced before. And my mom let out a soft sigh like a weight had been lifted, while my dad nodded slowly, as if agreeing with every word I said, and the younger ones looked on with wide eyes, seeing for the first time that standing up for yourself could be done without shouting, without violence, without losing control. And I told her that respect was earned, not demanded, and that the way she treated people around her had consequences that could no longer be ignored. And I reminded her that family was not about control or appearances, it was about care, connection, love, and understanding. And I could see the flicker of recognition in her eyes, that maybe for the first time she understood the depth of what she had done. And I continued speaking about forgiveness and boundaries, about rebuilding trust, and how she had a choice now to be better, to treat everyone with dignity, or continue down a path that led only to isolation. And I noticed her shoulders drop slightly, the tension in her body softening for the first time that day, and my voice stayed steady, calm, firm, as I poured everything I had felt and swallowed into the moment, creating a space for truth that could no longer be denied. And as I finished speaking, the room was silent, not uncomfortable silence, but a quiet that felt heavy with reflection, a silence that felt like the first breath after a storm, when everyone knew that things would never be the same again. And I realized in that moment that words had power, that confrontation could heal, and that sometimes chaos could be the beginning of clarity if faced with courage and honesty. And I felt a relief unlike anything I had known before, because I had finally spoken my truth and allowed everyone to see the situation for what it truly was. After the words finally left my mouth, the room felt different, as if the air itself had shifted, carrying a weight away that we had all been unknowingly holding for years. And my sister-in-law remained standing there, her expression slowly changing from defiance to uncertainty to something closer to realization. And I could see her eyes flicking to my parents, then back to me, as if she was trying to measure the impact of what had just been said. And around us, my family began to breathe more easily, their bodies relaxing, as if finally acknowledging that the storm had passed, not because she had changed immediately, but because we had stopped hiding the truth and faced it together, and I felt a sense of pride swelling in my chest because I had finally broken the cycle of silent suffering and set a precedent that respect would no longer be optional, that kindness would not be a weakness, and that every person in the room deserved to be treated with dignity. And I could see my mom leaning against the counter, letting out a soft sigh of relief, my dad standing a little straighter, the younger ones beginning to smile with cautious hope, and even my cousins who had been whispering nervously moments before now looked at me with admiration and understanding, because they witnessed that standing up for what is right does not always require anger, it requires courage, honesty, and clarity. And my sister-in-law finally spoke in a low voice, apologizing though not fully understanding the depth of her actions, but enough to acknowledge that she had caused harm, and that small admission felt like the first crack in a wall that had held years of tension. And I knew that forgiveness would not come overnight and rebuilding trust would take time, but for the first time we had a real chance to start over with awareness and boundaries. And I reminded everyone, including myself, that moving forward we must communicate openly, address issues before they fester, and value each other's efforts and feelings, because the soup incident was never really about the soup, it was about respect, care, and honesty. And as the silence lingered after her words, I felt the tension dissolve slowly, replaced by a cautious optimism, a sense that maybe we could all learn from this moment and allow the family to heal. And I realized that sometimes conflict is necessary, that it forces us to face uncomfortable truths and grow stronger as a unit. And I could feel a sense of accomplishment swelling inside me, knowing that I had turned a chaotic, destructive moment into a powerful lesson for all of us. And as we slowly began cleaning the remaining mess together, joking softly and speaking with new understanding, I felt a warmth in the room that had been missing for years, a warmth born not from food, not from pretense, but from truth, courage, and the beginnings of real connection. And in that moment, I knew that although the path ahead would not be perfect, we had taken the first step toward genuine harmony. After that day, the house felt lighter, almost as if the walls themselves had been holding in all the tension, and now they were finally breathing. And I could see the change in my family, the way my parents moved with less caution, the way my cousins laughed more freely, the way my younger siblings looked at each other with a new sense of safety, and even my sister-in-law seemed smaller, somehow humbled by the fact that the chaos she had created no longer held power over us. And as we continued our day together, there was a sense of cautious hope, a feeling that we could move forward differently, that respect and honesty could replace silent resentment and unspoken anger. And I realized how much courage it had taken for me to finally speak up, how long I had carried fear of confrontation, and how liberating it felt to release it. And as I watched everyone cleaning up the last traces of the soup and putting things back in order, I understood that life is full of unexpected moments that test patience, resilience, and understanding. And sometimes those moments are messy like spilled soup, and sometimes they are dramatic like arguments that echo through a house, but they always carry lessons if we are brave enough to face them. And I thought about the years of holding back, swallowing words, avoiding conflict, trying to keep everyone comfortable, and I felt proud that I had chosen a different path, that I had trusted my own voice and my own sense of right and wrong. And my sister-in-law finally spoke more openly, apologizing sincerely and asking how she could do better. And I realized that forgiveness is not about forgetting or pretending the past did not exist, it is about acknowledging harm and choosing to grow beyond it. And the rest of the day passed slowly, with conversations that were softer, kinder, more thoughtful, as we reflected on what had happened and what it meant for our family. And I felt a deep sense of satisfaction, because I knew that this was only the beginning of real change, a moment that would be remembered not for the soup, not for the argument, but for the courage to face the truth and the willingness to create better connections. And as evening fell and the sun cast a warm glow through the windows, I sat quietly watching my family interact with more patience, understanding, and care. And I realized that even though one small bowl of soup had caused a huge mess, it had also opened a door to something far greater, a chance to rebuild respect, love, and harmony in a home that had been waiting for it for years. And I knew that from this day forward we would carry the lessons with us, speak our truths when necessary, and never underestimate the power of courage, honesty, and compassion to turn chaos into clarity. And as I finally took a deep breath, I felt a lightness in my chest, a peace in my mind, and a hope in my heart that no matter what happened in the future, our family had the strength to face it together, stronger, wiser, and more connected than ever before. I remember the day starting with a strange calm around the house, as if everything had decided to stay soft and quiet before the storm that none of us saw coming, because I had spent the entire morning making a warm pot of soup, thinking it would bring everyone closer and ease the familiar tension that always followed my sister-in-law like a shadow that never fully left. And as I stirred the pot, I kept telling myself that today would be different, that we would sit together, talk together, laugh together, and maybe even feel like a normal family for once, even though deep inside I knew something was off in the way she had walked in through the door earlier with this energy that felt sharp and heavy, like she had carried her irritation from home and dropped it right into our living room. But I tried to ignore it because I wanted the day to stay peaceful, and I believed good food could change the atmosphere in ways words sometimes failed to. And when I finally served the soup, the steam rising Gently like a soft invitation to warmth, I saw my family settle into their seats, ready to taste what I had made with genuine care, hoping this moment would break the layers of discomfort that had built over time. And when she stepped forward, I handed her the bowl with a simple gesture, waiting for even the slightest sign of appreciation or maybe neutral acknowledgement, but instead she looked at it with a strange expression, as if the soup itself had offended her, and before I could even process the look on her face, she lifted the bowl and flipped it, letting the soup fall across the table and down to the floor in one sweeping motion that froze the entire room in shock, while every pair of eyes turned wide and tense, and I felt something inside me shake, because this was not just an accident or a careless mistake. It was a deliberate message, one wrapped in bitterness and resentment, and the silence that followed felt like a giant hand gripping all of us tighter and tighter, while I stood there trying to understand what pushed her to cross such a line. And as I stared at the mess dripping down the table legs, I could feel heat rising in my chest, not just from embarrassment, but from the countless small moments she had dismissed, insulted, or ignored me before, moments I had shrugged off because I kept hoping for harmony, but seeing the soup spread across the floor made everything clear that none of those moments were random and none were accidental, and the room felt smaller, heavier, suffocating as my parents shifted uncomfortably, trying to decide if they should speak or stay quiet, while she stood there with that smug expression, as if she had finally done something she had been waiting to do for a long time. And in that moment, I felt years of tension snap inside my mind like a rope pulled too tight for too long, and I knew this was only the beginning of a storm that had been building without any of us truly noticing. As everyone remained frozen in that heavy, charged silence, I could feel the weight of every unspoken argument pressing against my mind, and it was strange how a single act like dumping a bowl of soup could uncover years of hidden frustration tucked between forced smiles and quiet dinners, where everyone pretended things were fine, even though nothing ever felt fine around her, because she carried chaos the way some people carried perfume, leaving a trail behind her that lingered long after she walked away. And as the tension began to swell, my dad finally shifted in his seat, the wooden chair creaking beneath him like it was reacting to the discomfort in his chest, and he tried to speak, gently asking her why she had done that, but she only shrugged with a coldness that felt sharp enough to cut through the air, and I felt my heart beating faster, because her answer, or rather her refusal to answer, only added fuel to a fire that had been waiting to burn. And my mom quickly reached for a towel, trying to clean the mess, even though her hands were shaking, and I could see the embarrassment in her eyes, not because of the spill itself, but because she knew what it meant. She knew this was not about soup, this was about disrespect woven through years of tension that we had all tried to smooth over. And as she wiped the table, my sister-in-law stood unmoved, like the chaos around us was something she enjoyed watching, something she had orchestrated on purpose. And the murmurs began to rise from my cousins and uncles, each whisper layered with disbelief and frustration, because no one had expected this kind of behavior, especially not in a moment that was supposed to bring warmth, not war. And I took a breath, trying to steady myself, trying to keep from exploding, because I wanted to understand, I wanted to believe there was a reason behind her actions, even though my instincts told me she had done it simply because she could, because she wanted to provoke something or someone, maybe even me. And when I finally met her eyes, there was a challenge in them, a silent dare for me to react, to break, to crumble under the pressure she had created. And it reminded me of every moment she had belittled my efforts, mocked my cooking, judged my choices, and treated my home like a stage for her quiet hostility. And standing there, I realized how much of myself I had swallowed over the years, trying to keep peace that never belonged to us. And as the noise in the room grew louder, people speaking over each other, trying to make sense of what had happened, I felt something settle inside me, a decision forming slowly like a tide rolling in, and I knew that this moment was not going to fade into memory like the others. This one was going to break something open, something deep, something that had needed to come out for a long time. As the voices of my family layered over each other like waves crashing without rhythm, I felt myself stepping back, just slightly, letting the moment wash over me, because I needed to see all of it clearly, every expression, every whisper, every silent accusation floating between the people who had gathered for what should have been a calm family evening. And while I stood there, my eyes kept returning to the mess on the floor, the soup pooling slowly like some symbol of everything that had gone wrong. Over the years, every misunderstanding, every quiet insult, every moment I had let slide for the sake of family unity that never truly existed. And the longer I looked at that spill, the more I realized how many pieces of myself I had given away just to keep the peace, and none of it had ever been appreciated or even acknowledged. And as my sister-in-law leaned against the wall with that same arrogant calmness, I could sense her waiting for a reaction from me, waiting for me to lose control so she could twist the story later and paint herself as the victim, like she had done so many times before, in small, subtle ways that chipped at my patience and at my confidence. And I saw my mom stand up, her voice trembling as she told everyone to stop arguing because she could not bear the noise anymore. But the room had already crossed a point of no return, where everyone had something to say and everyone wanted to be heard louder than the next person. And my uncle stepped forward, raising his voice, asking my sister-in-law if she realized how rude and uncalled for her action had been, but she simply folded her arms and turned her head away as if the entire situation was beneath her, or as if she was proud of causing such a scene, and that single gesture sent a ripple through the room, a new wave of frustration that made every breath feel heavier, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest again, that old familiar burn of being pushed too far and too often. And then my cousin looked at me with a worried expression, quietly asking if I was okay, but I barely heard her because my mind was shifting through years of moments trying to understand why I had tolerated so much disrespect from one person who seemed determined to create conflict wherever she went. And I thought about the birthdays she ruined, the holidays she soured, the small gatherings where she acted like a queen, expecting everyone to revolve around her moods and her demands, and something inside me finally cracked open, letting the truth spill through every corner of my mind, reminding me that this was not about the soup, this was about everything she had been getting away with for far too long. And standing there in the middle of that loud, chaotic room, I knew that if I stayed silent again, I would lose a part of myself that I would never get back, and I felt my hands curl slightly as that realization settled deep and certain inside me, like a truth I could no longer ignore, no matter how hard I tried. The room kept shaking, with arguments rising and falling like unpredictable waves, and I stood there absorbing every sound, every tone, every restless breath, because in that chaos something inside me was becoming clearer, sharper, more defined, as if the truth I had been avoiding for years was finally standing right in front of me, asking to be acknowledged. And as my dad tried to take control of the situation, his voice raised not in anger but in disappointment, I watched my sister-in-law roll her eyes with the kind of disrespect that made everyone pause for a second, as if they were confused about whether they had actually seen what they just saw. And that single gesture cut deeper than her words ever had, because it held the weight of every time she dismissed our family, every time she looked down on us, every time she pretended to be better than the rest of us, even though she was the one constantly sowing bitterness wherever she went. And I found myself remembering moments I had buried, moments where she made snide remarks about my cooking, my home, my choices, moments I brushed off because I thought giving her kindness would soften her edges, but nothing softened her. In fact, my kindness seemed to feed her sense of power, making her believe she could treat us however she wanted without consequences. And as I stood there, the memories kept rising one after another like forgotten warnings, all leading up to this moment where everything made sense in a painful but undeniable way, and I could hear my younger cousins whispering behind me, trying to understand why an adult would act this way, while my mom kept wiping the table, even though the mess was already gone, because she needed her hands to stay busy, so her heart would not break in front of everyone. And the arguments around us kept going, people choosing sides, people trying to calm others down, people trying to defend what could not be defended. And through it all, my sister-in-law remained still, leaning back with smugness painted across her face, like she had won something, like she had proven some twisted point. And watching her pose in that false confidence made my chest tighten, because it reminded me how long we had allowed her to control the emotional temperature of every room she entered. And I realized that this was not just a breaking point for me, it was a breaking point for the entire family, because everyone was reacting differently, but they were all reacting to the same truth, the truth that her behavior had been a problem long before the soup hit the floor. And I felt a strange calm begin to settle inside me, not peaceful, but firm, as if my mind had finally stopped trying to justify what had never been justifiable. And as that calm spread through me, I knew the moment was coming when I would speak, not out of anger, but out of clarity, and every word I had swallowed over the years was rising now, asking to be said with the honesty I had denied myself for far too long. As that strange steady calm filled my mind, the voices around me began to blur together like distant echoes, while my focus narrowed onto the one person who stood there acting untouched by the chaos she created. And it amazed me how someone could cause such a storm and still pretend to be the victim, still pretend nothing was wrong, still pretend the world was supposed to bend around her moods. And I watched her shift her weight slightly, tapping her foot against the floor with impatience, as if she was tired of hearing people argue about the mess she started. And that single movement felt like another slap in the face, another reminder that she believed she had done nothing worth discussing. And I felt my breath grow heavier as memories kept resurfacing, uninvited memories of her criticizing the smallest things, from the way I decorated my home to the way I hosted gatherings to the way I tried to bring everyone together with food and warmth and understanding. And I realized she had never appreciated any of it, never respected the effort, never cared about the harmony I tried so desperately to maintain. And as people kept arguing around us, trying to decide who was right and who was wrong, I started to understand that the real problem was not the soup, the real problem was the years of disrespect hidden behind fake smiles and polite greetings. And I could see my dad rubbing his forehead, trying to calm himself, while my mom held on to the edge of the counter like she needed something solid to keep from breaking. And it hurt to see them suffer because of someone who never valued their kindness, someone who took advantage of their patience, someone who believed she could hurt people without facing consequences. And I felt something inside me tighten with determination, because I knew I could not let this moment pass like all the others. And I could hear my uncle raising his voice again, telling her that her behavior was unacceptable, but she simply scoffed and looked away, as if his words meant nothing, as if she lived in a world where her actions never had impact. And that attitude sparked a fire Inside me a fire that had been waiting for years for me to acknowledge it, and as I watched her stand there so confidently, so arrogantly, I realized that everything I had tolerated had brought us all to this moment, and I knew the silence I had kept for years was finally coming to an end, because I could not protect a peace that never existed, and I could not pretend that the pain she caused was small or forgettable, and I could not let her continue to treat us like objects she could manipulate. Whenever she felt like it, and with that fire burning stronger in my chest, I felt myself straighten my shoulders, preparing for the moment when I would finally speak the truth she needed to hear, and the truth I needed to say to reclaim the parts of myself I had sacrificed for far too long. As I stood there gathering the strength that had been building slowly inside me, I felt the atmosphere in the room shift just slightly, as if everyone sensed that something important was about to happen, and the arguments that had been loud and wild only moments ago began to soften, not because people were done fighting, but because their voices were running out of breath and their hearts were running out of patience. And through that thinning noise I watched my sister-in-law closely, noticing every detail of her posture, the way she crossed her arms, the way she avoided eye contact with anyone except the floor, the way she smirked every time someone tried to call out her behavior, and it amazed me how someone could stand in a room full of tension and still act as if she was above it all, untouched by the pain she caused, unaffected by the emotions swirling around her like a storm that had grown harder to ignore. And I felt a deep, heavy sadness settle in my chest, a sadness born from realizing how long I had tried to build a bridge towards someone who never wanted connection, who never wanted peace, who never wanted to be part of the family, but only wanted control and power and attention. And as I watched her shift her stance again, I remembered all the times she had undermined me in front of others with her subtle comments and sarcastic jokes, pretending she was being playful while stabbing at my confidence with every word, and I wondered how many times I had laughed awkwardly or brushed her off just to keep things civil, just to keep everyone else comfortable, while I swallowed my discomfort and carried the weight quietly on my own shoulders. And thinking about that made something inside me harden in a way it never had before, because I realized I had been battling for respect that she never intended to give. And in the corner of my eye, I saw my mom standing still, her hands clasped together so tightly that her knuckles had turned pale, because she too knew this moment was bigger than spilled soup. She knew this was a turning point in a long, painful history. And my dad paced slowly, as if searching for the right words, the right way to handle something that should never have been allowed to grow this far out of control. And even the younger ones, who usually laughed and played during gatherings, were now standing quietly, sensing the seriousness of the situation and looking back at me with wide, uncertain eyes that reminded me why this moment mattered, why I needed to speak, why I needed to finally take a stand, not just for myself, but for everyone who had been walking on eggshells around her for far too long. And with that thought my breath steadied, my hands stopped shaking, and a strange confidence began to rise inside me, a confidence built from years of silence breaking apart and turning into clarity. And I knew that whatever I said next would change everything, but I also knew that it needed to be said, because avoiding the truth had brought us here, and speaking it might be the only way to finally set us free.